and start recording this. Didn't need to have all that beginning portion. So this is Michael Hoyh of the Benton Harbor Preservation Society. And Michael, whenever you're ready, feel free to go ahead and get started.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us and hi, now we're over here. Great. So I just want to say thank you for inviting us and to speak on one of my favorite topics, Mr. William E. Sheffield. So Mr. William E. Sheffield was, and we kind of have a little fun with it, and I do say this publicly, he was the first original drug dealer of Benton Harbor. He was a pharmacist, and he was one of the most trusted pharmacists in I would think all of Berrien County. And the reason I say that is because his head pharmacist, which his name was Mr. John Smith, was with him for over 20 years. And Mr. Sheffield, as a pharmacist, he only wanted the best in his store. And he really sought after having all the best things in his store. And it was not only just a pharmacy, but it was also a book depository. So when the Benton Harbor College was up on Morton Hill, that's where you would come and get your books. And that's where you come and would get your supplies. So he was all about education. He was all about higher learning. And he was, again, like I said, just a phenomenal pharmacist. His building was located right in the heart of Benton Harbor, right down on Pipestone, near Pipestone and Main Street. The proper address is 136. Now that building actually burnt down and it was rebuilt. And most currently, it has been totally renovated by a gentleman by the name of Ken Ankley. And Ken has done a fantastic job, and we'll see more about what Ken has done and how he's unearthed a lot of the things about Mr. Sheffield and his role that he played here in Benton Harbor. But when I got interested in Mr. Sheffield was many years ago, and it was probably good 12, even more than 12, more like 20 years ago. The Sheffield Building was also known as the Benton Harbor Soup Kitchen. And at the time, the Benton Harbor Soup Kitchen, I would spend time down there and go in there. And I didn't know that much about Mr. Sheffield. I just knew it was a really great place to be and just hang out with people. And I would do some of the serving down there. Well, when the community renewal through the arts came through, Isaac Duncan was one of the first residents in artist in residency, and he actually lived in that building. And Isaac did a lot of renovation. Isaac did a lot of artwork in that building, and I spent a lot of time there. And I was just like, "Who is this Mr. Sheffield? Who is this guy?" And I started to research a little bit more about him, and I saw that his mausoleum was out in Crystal Springs Cemetery. Well, also at Crystal Springs Cemetery, he has his own road. His own road is actually, there's a marker there you'll see, which is his road, and there's a marker that just says, there you go, Sheffield Road, 1924. So I'm like, wait a second, who is this guy? Who gets their own road, okay, in a cemetery? Okay, so then I was out there a couple years later, and I was with a friend who's very well read, and we actually were looking at his mausoleum, and his tombstone of his name is behind the building. So that was really weird that W.E. Sheffield, which I think I sent you a photograph, is actually behind his mausoleum. So, yep, we're going to go to one more, and you should be able to get the one where it says W.E. Sheffield. And it has, there's a great big stone that has his name behind the building. Like, who would put their name behind the building? So then as we actually looked at the front of the building, we see that Mr. Sheffield, and I didn't know anything about Masons and all that kind of stuff. And we actually go ahead and we see that he's a high Mason. And I guess number 32 is like the highest you can get, or 36 or something like that. So again, I was like, who is this guy? And he actually has other family members that are there buried with him in this area. And just recently, as I was out there just today taking some of the photographs, I saw that Mr. Sheffield actually paved the road for Mr. Brunson, and that's another header that's out there. You'll see it say Brunson Avenue. So Mr. Sheffield in 1925, I guess when Crystal Springs Cemetery was actually being built, he actually paved and paid for the road for Mr. Brunson. I mean, that just tells me a lot about who this gentleman was. Now, I did not know this, and that's the great thing about Benton Harbor history. There's just so many layers to it. Dennis Brulman, he actually sent me a photograph, and as you enter into Crystal Springs Cemetery, there is a memorial garden that's dedicated to his wife, and we'll get that picture up for you later. And that's just so as you enter into Crystal Springs Cemetery, it's the very first thing that you see. The flagpole is actually right there in the middle of her garden. I'm like, so again, I was like, who is this gentleman? And tell me more about him. Well, most recently, we were able to acquire, which is the Legacy Group, we were able to acquire the oldest church in Benton Harbor, which is the First Congregational Church, located at Bellevue, Pipestone, and Broadway. Well, Mr. Sheffield's house is actually at 693 Pipestone, right up the street. I did not know that Mr. Sheffield was actually a member of the First Congregational Church. So while we were going through a lot of the archives and things of that nature, we came upon his family Bible. So in the family Bible, you have a photograph of that. You'll see that Mr. And again, I was with Tracy Jennings, Cleveland, and we were looking at some of the things, and she goes, well, he was a Mason, because there's the Alpha and the Omega. I'm like, wow. So we start looking at some other things, and we found out that Mr. Sheffield was part of this group called Mitzvah, the Mitzvah group. And I'm like, okay, so what is this Mitzvah group? So we found all these different collages and these different writings and things of that nature of the Mitzvah group. Okay. And he was a member of the Mitzvah group. Well, then someone told me that, well, there's a street over there off of M63 called Mitzvah. And I always assumed it was something maybe possibly Jewish. Yeah, there's the photograph. There you go, of his family Bible and what we found actually inside the family Bible there. Yeah, that was, I guess, what he wore around his neck, maybe as one of the Masons. Again, there's things that we're just finding out about this, but yeah, that's actually what we found inside the family Bible. And then the next photograph that you have there, you actually see the inscription that he subscribed to his parents, that that was his family Bible. Yeah, there you go. So Mr. Sheffield, and it's just it's amazing what he contributed to the city. You'll see a picture that we sent of you of his house, and just he gave a lot of his richnesses and his monies to the church. We have records of that, and his legacy of his building is being renovated. It's totally renovated now by Ken Inkley, and what he has done with the building. And it's just a really great story of a local person who, and he was also part of a bank, and the bank that he was with was called the American National Bank. Now, I'm sorry, I don't know where the American National Bank was. Somebody could possibly help us out with that, but he was one of the originators of the American National Bank in the city of Benton Harbor. And he was one of the first original board members, and he helped put that bank together. So again, I'm just, who is this gentleman? What role did he play? So this whole mitzvah thing that you have, some of the collages and some of the pamphlets and things of that nature, you'll see that the Mortons were part of the mitzvahs. You'll see that Mrs. Emery Upton was part of the mitzvah group, and a whole bunch of other names. And you'll see some of the things that we sent you. But so I said, let me Google this and find out what mitzvah is and how it correlates with the Masons. And come to find out, and it took me a little time, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, there is a mitzvah High Mason group. I think it's number 69, if I'm correct. And I got a hold of Mike. I forget his last name, starts with the S. And we started talking, and I had to get into the group, and I told him who I was. I told him the background about who Mr. Sheffield is, and how we found some things about mitzvah and how he was related to be a Mason and things of that nature. And we're still in conversations with that as to Mike over there in Cedar Rapids said that he knew that there were some high Masons from Mitzvah in Grand Rapids, but he had never heard anything about the Benton Harbor area. So that's something else that we're digging into, and we're trying to find out what role did the Mitzvah slash Mr. Sheffield slash the Masons and this little kind of like private society belong to. And one of the things that's in the front of the First Congregational Church is there is it distinctly says that there's a mason. It's a young man, and he's on the left of the entrance, and it's made out of cement or mason, and it's a mason young boy, and he's an apprentice. And then over to the far right of the door, as you enter the First Congregational Church, you'll see an older man, and that's where he gains wisdom as a mason to build a building like the First Congregational Church. And I didn't realize this until recently. I don't know who pointed this out to me, but there's a little owl there with a little scroll, and that's about wisdom. So you gain wisdom as you start as an apprentice and as you end up to be an older man. Yeah, so there's some of the things about the mitzvah. And again, I didn't know what mitzvah was and how it's correlated to Mr. Sheffield, but we have records of Mr. Sheffield being a part of the mitzvah group later in life, not as early as the 1900s, but you'll see we have the actual first and second and things of that nature of their banquets that they had. And what's interesting in one of them that you have there is that, let me see, I have it with me, is that, and seeing that, we're going through this, COVID situation right now, that in this one that I have here of the mitzvah, and I did post this one on Facebook, but if you open it up, okay, which is really great, and you go a couple pages into it, in the middle here, it reads this. It says, our honor roll. The Sunday school was closed 5 Sundays during 1918, 1 Sunday on account of a blizzard, and 4 Sundays on account of the influenza, making 47 Sundays perfect attendance for the year. And those people who made the perfect attendance was Mrs. Irene Kuhn, Mrs. Della C. Morton, and I contacted the Morton House, and Debbie over the Morton House has, hopefully she's joining us, or maybe even Chuck is from the Morton House, and they can share a little bit more about how the Mortons were actually part of also this mitzvah group. And also the last one is Mrs. Cora B. Upton. So that's kind of really cool. And again, I don't know all the history to the mitzvah group. We're just finding this out. I just actually came across this, I believe, in July. So I'm learning more about it as we dig into Mr. Sheffield.
Sorry,
are you there?
I am here. So, William.
So that's my lead in. That's my lead into this.
Okay. So now I have a question about, William. Do we really, we know he was you said he was a
pharmacist.
A pharmacist, and that he had founded a few things in town. Was he ever really in any like political positions? Was he in other groups besides the mitzvah, or?
I know that he was a member of the church, but I really need to find out, where was he born? How did he travel here? How did he get to Benton Harbor? Did he did have a sibling? He did have a son, and the son actually was, I think he had a law firm, okay, here locally in Benton Harbor. So that's the only one that I know about his son. But again, I don't know where he came from. Did he come from, from the English states, meaning like Maine or Vermont or Connecticut? I don't know. And those are things that I'm really interested in to find out too.
What has been your biggest, obviously you have quite a bit of his mitzvah stuff, but what has been your biggest challenge in trying to tell his story? It seems like you have a lot of one thing, but you're missing a lot of like William Sheffield, the person, like as you said, who is he married to? Who is his children? Where does his children go on? What grandkids were happening? Is the family still in the area? What was, where's he, where's his family roots from? Why do you think for William, given the fact that he was clearly
great
in the early part of the 1900s, why is he such a challenge in comparison to some other well-known individuals? You got the Mortons, you got Upton, all these big names in this honor roll.
Brunsons, yeah.
Yeah, why is he kind of the, I guess
so this is just my imagination of this is my imagination of him. He seems to be a very simple person. Okay, he was not someone of grandeur. He wasn't someone of ambiance. Okay, he was just a very low key, quiet person, and just kind of, kept to himself and did his own thing. Okay, he wasn't about, put my name on a billboard or something like that. That's just the way I take him. The photographs that we have of him and things of that nature. And in Mason work, you're actually kind of quiet. You know what I'm saying? You're you don't do your works out loud. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. So, what is your, I mean, you're collecting all this information, obviously long-term for Benton Harbor Preservation Society. You want to preserve as many stories as you can, but um, what do you plan on doing once you get the stories collected? What do you plan on doing with them? Do you plan on writing a book or doing displays? What's the end goal of learning more about William Sheffield and then getting his story out there?
So currently we're working with the Legacy Board, which I'm also the president of, and the Benton Harbor Historical Preservation Society is separate from the Legacy Group. And we are looking to house the Benton Harbor Historical Preservation Society inside of the First Congregational Church. And that will allow us the space to do, exhibits, to have an archive room, to have an exhibit room, and to be able to do, large events, because the Saunders Hall, which is located in the building, which is an auditorium, has a stage, it has a movie theater house, okay, and it allows for almost 500 to 700 people to attend. So in our larger vision for the Benton Harbor Historical Preservation Society and for the Legacy Group and for the history of Benton Harbor is to bring those together. And we're just at the very beginning stages of this conversation, and we're taking it very slow. But that's what our focus is to the Morton House does an incredible job. Okay, the House of David does an incredible job. The Heritage does an incredible job. But there's, in the city of Benton Harbor, there's just so many stories, and this will be our way of, getting it out to a larger group.
Fantastic. Another question that I had is why William Sheffield as your symbol, given he is this very hard person to find information on. It seems very antithesis to a group so intent on sharing stories and being so open that you'd pick William Sheffield of all people as your logo, as part of your logo.
Well, I kind of said some of it, again, you could have had Mr. Søren Brunson, you could have had Calvin Britton. I mean, you could have had Mr. Morton, you could have had a selection of people, but there was something that kept bringing me back to Mr. Sheffield. I mean, I'm talking, like I said, almost 27 years ago when Isaac Duncan was actually, and I shared with you when when I would do things at the soup kitchen, the Benton Harbor Soup Kitchen was inside, okay, the Sheffield Building. And that was just a meaningful time of community. There's pictures out there of just, people that, were down on their luck or just needed a bowl of soup. And the churches would come in there and they would, Mrs. Whitwam, Barbara Whitwam, she was down there, from the family of the Whitwams. She was down there every day, and it just had a really great energy. And then when Isaac Duncan moved in to the second floor, and he was doing his artwork there, which is part of Cornerstone's renewal through the art with the Mendels, it just took on another meaning to me. And, I was up late at night with Duncan doing, all kinds of artwork at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. It was very artsy, fartsy, funky. Okay. And then, like I said, I started learning more about Mr. Sheffield by his, like I said, who has a road dedicated to themselves in a cemetery? Okay. And then he paid for Mr. Brunson's road to be paved. Okay. And then I didn't know what a high masons were because I didn't know what the symbolism was. And that was until like 3 or 4 years ago. And my friend says, well, look at that mason thing. Okay. I'm like, well, I said, well, what's that all about? And why would he put his name behind the mausoleum? It says Sheffield right there, but W.E. Sheffield faces out towards the ravine. Okay. Where really nobody would see. So that tells me another thing about him. It wasn't about if you see what I sent you, the plaques actually say it's more about his wife and his memory of his wife, and the other plaques say in memory of his loving wife, this is the end of our journey. So it seems like he had a really great love affair with his wife, and I think that's really where he stood in family values. I know he played a big, huge role in the church. Okay. And I think maybe that's why, again, I don't know why I chose him, but those are parts of the reason in the whole thing, okay, I'm a what's her name from Mr. Sheffield? Fran Jesser? Mr. Sheffield?
The Fran
nanny?
Dresser, yeah,
The nanny. There you go. I'm sorry. And we had a family member that would always go, oh, Mr. Sheffield. And for years when I was growing up, she would always go, oh, Mr. Sheffield. So I don't know, maybe I was brainwashed. I don't know exactly. But again, he just kept coming back to me. And then to find his family, and again, I had no idea that I started the Historical Society 7 or 8 years ago. Okay. I had no idea that I was going to, acquire with the board, the legacy group, and have the first congregation. And then to find his family Bible in there and his shroud that he wore with the Alpha and the Omega, I was just like, it blew me away. It just blew me away. And so I think it was just kind of meant to be, and that the Benton Harbor Historical Preservation Society belongs in that building. It was just almost like, a higher calling. Yeah.
So just a couple of things. So the double-headed eagle, if you missed it in the chat, the double-headed eagle is one of the symbols of the Scottish Rite. So in Freemasonry, there's a couple of different paths. You have the Scottish Rite, which are all the degrees. They go from 4 to 33, 33 being the highest. And then there is the York Rite, and York Rite's divvied up between Royal Arch, Knights Templar, and the Malta group. Can't remember the exact thing. And the only reason why I know any of this, ladies and gentlemen, is I literally just installed the Masonic exhibit yesterday, so I write all of this. And so a lot of times what you'll see if you're going through cemeteries like Mr. Sheffield's mausoleum is that 32. That meant he reached the 32nd degree level. It's a very high ranking level. This is not a low level. They had to go through a lot of work to get there. But Mitzpah is fascinating because typically when a lodge gets a name, that's the name for that lodge. So Mitzpah seems to be kind of an offshoot group of Freemasons. And I'm going to screen share real quick a couple of things. So if you Google Mitzpah, a Mitzpah Masonic group, you're getting all sorts of organizations, and most of them seem to be in the High Plains states, Omaha, Missouri, Kansas, Iowa. And so there are, so for example, this one is the one in Omaha. And the neat thing is if you look at the dates on those Mitzpah items that Michael had shared images of, the dates on there, 1916, 1917, 1918.
Right.
Those actually predate this Omaha lodge that was chartered in 1918. So here you have this offshoot little lodge. For some reason, it's in Michigan, east of the Mississippi, being chartered before some of these lodges were even chartered themselves in the primary service area. It seems they started in the Plain States and moved westward. So it's fascinating to see one that's moved eastward. It's certainly, chartered 1919. They put everything in 1918. So they are obviously a part of the Masonic groups. I keep getting yelled at by the Masons saying I'm saying that wrong. I'm from Chicago. It's a hard A. So you can see that they have the symbol that's the ancient free and I can't remember something about free and AM. I have it written at home. No, office. I'm at home.
We've had a busy week.
I've been installing exhibits and doing massive renovations. So
I know we want to talk about that too.
Good. So here's a group so it's very fascinating, and it's not a surprise that people like the Mortons and William Sheffield were in this group, because Masons often attract people who want to improve their community, which falls in line with what you've so far discovered about Mr. Sheffield, as someone who is improving his community, and he's doing so, as you're saying, rather quietly. Certainly, I never heard of them. Well, I can't say anything, really not from the area, but I certainly never heard of him as a major player, not like you hear about the Mortons or the Uptons or other groups like that.
Exactly. Great, thank you. Beautiful shot.
I do want to go back to this wonderful series of photos that you have sent me earlier about the Sheffield Building.
I have to give credit. That's from Ken. I have to give credit to Ken Ankley. This is Ken Ankley who's done this.
Fantastic. So according to this, this was dated about 2.5 to 3 years ago. So this has been a bit of a time.
Wow.
And these are all renovations of the interior of the building. And this is pretty standard for the time period, the use of the brick walls, your very close beams to support technically your floor joists for the next level. These big, beautiful windows. And looks like they were able to go down to the original flooring, or at least the original subflooring, which means if they're anything like the buildings I worked with in the past, basically were like 8 layers on top of each other, and 3 of them are literally glued to each other. And so renovation of this level is not very easy, but it's actually historic preservation of this size is not only economically more sound, meaning it is cheaper to renovate a historic building, but it's also it provides a broader range of skills for the groups that are with it. So someone who understands historic electrical wiring, how do you handle that? How can we replace it? How can we redo it? I worked with a wonderful historic preservationist in Texas who actually had an apprentice program for traditional building techniques. And they worked to preserve about 15 or so buildings in the town I worked in. And so the fun thing about working in historic buildings are all the neat little things that you find. Here is a fire in 1918.
That's when his building burnt down.
So you can see, these big windows, these beautiful bays. Look at the clock. This is pretty cool, the clock out here. So that's it. It's a ghost. It's blocking the window.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Up here, you see the old tin ceiling as well, and you actually see what looks like some scorch marks. So.
Wow, I haven't been able to see all of these. These are great. Thank you, Ken.
So, and here is the cutaway, so you can actually see the brickwork here in between the levels as well. So this looks to be some signage that was found on the interior.
Yeah, that was actually the doorway. That was part of the doorway.
Fantastic. Oops. So that looks to be the back of the building.
Yes.
So it looks like he was gutting that building basically down to the studs.
100%.
Oh, see, now look at that build up. That's a sexy build up, guys. I'm assuming this is a restored version of it.
Yep. No, that is actually the pieces to it restored. Yes.
Okay, I want to go back to that real quick. Hang on, I got 5 things I got in my way. So I want you to look at this. So if you guys look at this, this is a beautiful restoration. Not only did it change color, the differentiation between what was carved and the exterior portion of that stone is a lot brighter. A lot of times when I get asked by tourists whenever I worked in museums was, well, that's very hard. That sign is very hard to read. The reality is at the time, before time and weather got to it, it was very easy to read. There was a distinction between the color of the stone and whatever carving, the image or the letters were carved into it. So really that's why when people are like, oh, it seems so hard to read. No, this is why they were able to see it quite well.
And that was done by an artist by the name of Rico, and he's a great friend of ours, and also from Shane Franks from Evergreen Construction.
And so,
now look at that.
Yeah, I gotta be safe on that, right?
They found look at the flooring there.
So the hexagonal was a very, very common thing at the turn of the century, and the use of this, not quite Deco, it's a little bit before Art Deco, but the use of the square pattern was pretty common at the time as well. The beautiful color, you don't normally see a red coloring. Oh, linoleum. Chuck says the Houndstooth restaurant located in the Sheffield is a great restaurant. You can stay upstairs at an Airbnb.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, look at that view. Who doesn't want that view? Look at that. Okay, and that's Mr. Sheffield right there.
That's Mr. Sheffield.
So really by opening this space up, it's taking it kind of back to its roots as a service center for the community.
Exactly.
As a business, as a home, as multiple things. So here's kind of what the difference is. Historic preservation does take a long time, but it's absolutely worth it. The other reason why you should support, and I'm going to say this because they just passed it in the State House at the end of the year.
The
historic preservation tax credit. These are important things to support. I don't even know why it was taken away. These are super popular in every state that they've ever been in. But individuals can receive tax credits. Well, at this time, probably not, because it was already off the books here in Michigan. But the idea is that if you purchase a historic property, and please keep in mind in 2021, basically anything from 1971 and older would be considered a historic property. It's typically 50 years or older. So if you're born in 1971 or older, I'm sorry, guys, you're historic. Those homes can be eligible for tax credits for preservation and renovation. We get a lot of questions about whether or not somebody should put their house on the National Register. Please keep in mind, if you do put your house on a national, state, or any sort of historic register, like some cities will have them, you are limited to what you can do on the exterior. It has to be preserved exactly the way it was or restored back to its original viewpoint. But the interior, you can basically gut and turn into a roller rink if you want. It really doesn't matter. But if you're wanting to make changes to the exterior, you have to follow the guidelines. That means the windows have to be the right style, or the siding needs to be the right style. You can't paint it, hunter green if it was actually really a purple color.
Right.
So there are a lot of limitations, but the idea is it's meant to preserve those buildings. But if you want to do it, go for it, man. The more history we have preserved, the better. And there are some.
Now, are the viewers seeing these photos as you flip through them?
They should be. This is a screen share. So if you're seeing it, they should be seeing it as well.
Perfect. I mean, look at that. So that's what I knew as the soup kitchen. That's where I would go and just be with the locals and spend some time down there. There's a old rickety piano. I think that's a piano you can see in the front window there. Yeah.
Yep.
And we would just sing and laugh, enjoy. It was great.
And then some nice cars reflected in the windows. So, I'm not sure why it's doing that, but okay.
So this is some of the things that they found there, and some of the things that Shane Franks and them did for the Houndstooth, which is the new restaurant, which is, if you can get into the Houndstooth and things like that, it's unbelievable what they're doing with the Houndstooth cuisine down there. Look at this restaurant now.
Okay, that looks like somebody's house. Like, that doesn't look like no restaurant.
No, that is a restaurant. There they are. Yep, there's our friends. Yep, Gabby and James. Yeah, look at that.
So while they went with a very contemporary, modern look, the utilization of the windows, of the brickwork, all harken back to probably what it would have looked like when Michael Sheffield, I'm determined to call him Michael, William Sheffield had owned the building. Oh. Technically, it's my Friday, so as soon as this is done,
there you go, I got that.
My brain can just...
Look at that, isn't that amazing?
And this is not a special advertisement for the Houndstooth. It just happens to work out that it's in the building.
No, the Houndstooth deserve it. The lock, stock, and steel. They are amazing people.
So, okay, I'm gonna stop my screen share here because that's pretty much the end of it. The rest of it's very similar photos. So really that's, I mean, I guess when we were talking about like, we're gonna discover William Sheffield, the reality is there's a lot we haven't discovered.
You got it.
Him. So it looks like maybe within the next year, we're going to have to bring you back and share what new things you have discovered. So just a couple of questions. Where is the cemetery he's buried at again?
There's Crystal Springs Cemetery, which is at Crystal and Napier, and Pipestone.
Okay. And then if you're going into the cemetery, is he very easy to find? Or?
Well, his wife's memorial is the first thing that you see on the left-hand side. Then you kind of veer off to your left, but you go across the bridge. When you go across the bridge, you'll see the Opera House Firemen's memorial right there as you cross the bridge. It's exactly a hard left. He's right there, the first thing that you see when you come in.
So he'd be easy to access for most people if they enter the cemetery.
300%, very easy.
Okay. Good, because people always ask. And then what was the other question I had for you? I guess the question, is there any questions from people in the our audience today, our Zoom participants? And Chuck, thank you for making that comment about the Houndstooth. I think that as we start seeing more renovation and preservation in Benton Harbor, we're going to start seeing a lot of what you're saying, more Airbnbs, more hotels, more mixed use of these buildings are already there, because we're already seeing it with that one building there near the chamber. So,
right, that's Mr. Saunders. It was called Mr. Saunders Gray, which was their building, and Mr. Saunders is the Saunders Hall, which is the auditorium inside of our church.
Fascinating. Now, my question for you, Michael, if someone is interested in doing research about Benton Harbor, its residents, its buildings, or anything else, how do they get a hold of you guys to come do research?
You can reach us through our Facebook page, the Benton Harbor Historical Preservation Society. And my phone number is 269-769-3020. Very easy to find.
Fantastic. And so basically they just have to make an appointment and they can meet you at your office and
300%.
fantastic. Is there any questions from you guys? You guys, you're probably one of my quietest Zoom groups I've had in a while. So it's like, are you still with me? Did you walk away? Any comments about Mr. Sheffield? Any other questions? No, no, no.
Well, I see some chats down there. Do you click on the chats? Does that do anything?
Yeah, a lot of that's me making comments about like
Okay.
the Scottish Rite and things like that. Also, for those of you who missed it, the symbol on the sash looks like the Alpha Omega, which is a pretty common Christian symbol. You see it both in Catholic and in Protestant tombstones quite a lot. And it's not a surprise, even though most Freemason groups are non-denominational in the truest sense, meaning you can be of any faith and join a Freemason. There is still a bit of a Christian undertone in a lot of them, including the use of Alpha Omega. And some groups, some offshoots of Masonry do hit into the Christian imagery a lot more than others. So that could be it. Like the Knights Templar uses a lot of Christian imagery. The Knights of Malta did as well. So there's like 85 offshoots of of Masonry, and they each have various levels of religious and militaristic kind of approach. So
I just want to do a kind of like a shout out. Please go see the Sheffield Building. Go and enjoy a great meal at Houndstooth. And I'm sure Mr. Sheffield will touch you in some way. And, you know, and just, you know, he's just an amazing person. And, you know, I just want to thank Ken Inkley for sharing these photos with me. And thank you for allowing us to come on and do this this talk today.
no problem. I'm glad you decided to come out. Oh,
There's Chuck.
There's Chuck. Chuck, did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to add that the Sheffield house up on Pipestone is still there. It's a great house, Queen Anne style house. Seems to be kind of in a perpetual state of renovation, but I don't know if Michael, thanks for doing the talk, has
Thank you, Chuck.
whatever, but you should definitely check out his house too. It's one of the great houses in Benton Harbor.
Quick screen share.
There we go. Yep.
There you go.
And there's a great big coach house barn in the back. Yeah.
So, and actually this is pretty emblematic of a lot of the more upper level homes in Benton Harbor, is these beautiful columns, these beautiful windows.
The little gazebo out there to sit on the front porch.
Okay, I would commit various acts of criminal activity for a house that looked like that. Let me tell you.
Well, let me let you know that there's a Michigan State police officer who lives there.
Oh, well, I'll ask nicely. Can I just
Okay.
on your porch? It's very pretty. Anyway, so that is the house. I'm going to stop screen share. Chuck, did you have anything else you wanted to say, or were you that was kind of about it?
Nope, that was it. So yeah, thanks for doing this.
No problem. Okay, well, I think that's all. If nobody else has any other questions, that's fine. Feel free to email us at info@berrienhistory.org. If you have further questions, we are always happy to pass it on to Michael, or you can contact them through Facebook. Again, the Benton Harbor Historic Preservation Society, very easy to find. And of course, Michael's phone number is attached to it, so you'll be able to give him a text or a call if you need to. Just as a reminder, we will put this on in the next couple of weeks. I would do the, I got to do some editing and then get it up on YouTube. You'll be able to access our YouTube page through the front page of our website, berrienhistory.org. And all of our TNC talks, including the 3 from last year that I've yet to upload, will be put up there. 2021, we're going to do better on the technology side. We are going to work on that. Then our next TNC talk will continue the talk of Masons. That'll be February, second Thursday in February. I believe that is you think I have all this memorized by now, the 11th at 6:30. That will be Dirk Hughes from the Michigan Masonic Museum. Will be talking about the Prince Hall Masons, which is a predominantly African-American group and one of the largest African-American fraternal groups in the US. So if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, you guys have a great weekend. We are so grateful you came out. We hope you enjoyed tonight's TNC talk, and we'll see you in a few weeks for our next one, or maybe before then for other programs. If there's no other questions, we hope you guys have a great evening. Bye-bye.
I'd like to say thank you. I'm Rosemary Lee, and I grew up in Buchanan. I now live in Montana. I'm a member of the Berrien County Historical Association. My roots are right there in Berrien Springs and Benton Harbor. My grandparents both graduated from Benton Harbor High School in 1906. And then my grandfather, Sidney Mitchell, went on to become superintendent of schools there, and he actually founded Benton Harbor College. As a young boy, he went to the school up on Morton Hill.
Wow.
I'm just always very interested in genealogy and area history, and so I enjoyed this very much. I didn't know about Mr. Sheffield, but my grandparents are buried at Crystal Springs as well. I have visited them there. Thank you so much.
No,
Thank you, Rosemary. We got to stay in touch.
Okay.
And I do want to make sure that you understand we're making a commitment to our members, our friends, our partners, and others to diversify the stories we're telling here in Berrien County. We want to make sure that we're not stepping on the toes of groups like the Preservation Society, but our goal is to make sure that we're promoting their voices and making sure that we're collecting those stories as well, so that we all can continue to share this history with everyone.
Thank you. That was beautifully said.
Yes.
All right, everyone, you have a great evening, and we will see you at our next program.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.